At 7 a.m., the HOA president stood on my dock, shrieking about my illegal boat ruining the community lake while trespassing on my private property, threatening me with a lawsuit over water I actually owned. Karen Whitmore's sharp heels pierced the cedar planks I had stained the summer before, waving a cease and desist letter like it was a loaded weapon. "This rust bucket is gone by Friday, Sterling, or I'm calling my lawyer and the sheriff. $200 a day in fines. And we'll slap a lien on this shack you call a home." The diesel scent of my fully restored 87 Chris Craft mingled with her overpowering perfume as she jabbed a blood-red fingernail toward my pride and joy. What she didn't realize, that so-called community lake, every single drop, all 47 acres, was mine. The thing about bullies is they always outline exactly how they'll self-destruct. So I just sipped my coffee, smiled, and let Karen dig the grave that would end her HOA reign. What would you do if someone tried to claim your property right in front of you? Drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from, and share your worst HO and nightmare. But let me rewind 18 months to when this whole disaster began. I'm Marcus Sterling, 52. I spent 25 years running military logistics before finally whizzing up and retiring to the mountains. My Uncle Theodore left me this cabin on what I thought was just another pretty lake in Colorado. He'd always been the eccentric in our family, a recluse with secret money stashed everywhere. The cabin itself wasn't fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen stuck in 1970. But that view? Sitting on the porch with morning coffee, mist curling off the still water while loons called back and forth, that was peace after years of chaos. The lake was shaped like a teardrop. 47 acres of crystal mountain water ringed by 12 modest homes, simple, quiet. Or so I thought until I met Karen Whitmore. She moved in 3 houses down 6 months after me. White BMW, white teeth, white lies. Everything about her screamed, "I don't belong here, but I'll take over anyway." She was 48, a real estate agent, married to some wannabe city councilman named Derek. Within 2 weeks, she was HOA president. Funny how that works when no one else wants the job. My first warning sign came when she introduced herself. I was out on the dock working on the boat engine, the wrecked Chris Craft I had spent 3 years restoring, bolt by bolt, wood by wood. She strutted down in her ridiculous heels, gave me her practiced realtor smile, and said, "Oh, you're the military guy. Well, I trust you understand we uphold certain standards here." The way she dripped condescension on that phrase should have told me everything. Soon, the boat became her fixation. Too large, too noisy, didn't fit her vision of the lakefront aesthetic. Never mind that half the other docks held boats just as big. Never mind that mine was the most beautiful vessel on the water. Karen had chosen me as her target, and Karen always expected to win. The scent of her perfume, something designer, probably worth more than my grocery budget, hung in the air long after she left. Mixed with the real smell of cedar and creosote from the dock pilings, it felt like an invasion, fake flowers masking a wild garden. Then came the first violation notice. A Tuesday. Crisp white HOA letterhead loaded with legal threats meant to scare anyone unprepared. Oversized recreational vessel violates covenant 14.7b, $200 daily until removed. But the Army had taught me we'll never react before gathering intelligence. So instead of getting angry, I got curious. Who was this woman who thought she could order a retired officer around on his own property? More importantly, what had Uncle Theodore actually left me? Because one lesson 25 years of logistics drilled into me, the one with the most information always wins. And Karen had not done her homework. 3 days later, she turned up the heat. An emergency HOA meeting scheduled, of course, at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday when most neighbors couldn't attend. Classic tactic. Stack the deck, control the story, win by default. I showed up anyway, green deployment notebook in hand. Thermos of coffee and the other coffee that smelled far better than her choking perfume that filled her pristine living room. Her house looked like a showroom explosion white leather. Glass tables, staged perfection that warned guests not to breathe too hard. She'd assembled her loyal trio of retirees who agreed with everything she said, plus Derek in the corner, looking like a nervous accountant with someone else's money. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen began, flipping open her laptop with the flair of a prosecutor about to announce a guilty verdict. "We are facing a crisis that threatens our communities." Very character. And then the PowerPoint, 20 full slides. About my boat. I'm not kidding. She'd taken photos from absurd angles, low shots that made it look like the Titanic, wide shots that made my 30-footer seem like it swallowed the entire lake. I'll give her this. The woman had talent. Twisted talent, but talent nonetheless. "Mr. Sterling's vessel," she said, pronouncing vessel like it was a disease, "exceeds size limits and creates unsafe navigation hazards. The engine noise disrupts the peace during early morning hours." I sat quietly, letting her performance play out like some low-budget courtroom drama, jotting every accusation into my notebook. My old sergeant had a saying, "Sterling, when someone's digging their own grave, don't take the shovel, just hand them a bigger one." When her dog and pony show wrapped up, I raised my hand calmly. "Ma'am, I appreciate the professional slides, but I do have some questions." Her realtor's smile pulled tighter, strung like a wire ready to snap. "Could you specify these so-called size restrictions? I've read the covenants twice, yet found no exact boat length listed." I flipped through my marked copy, each relevant clause tabbed with military precision. Her pitch climbed higher. "It's clearly implied in the aesthetic standards clause." Implied. Interesting. My pen scratched notes, loud in the sudden silence. Second question. Derek owns 2 jet skis and that cigarette boat. Combined length? Because from my dock, they look about equal to my single vessel. Derek's nervous gulp echoed across the room. That's when my 25 years wrangling military bureaucracy paid off. I'd visited City Hall that morning. Bureaucrats love helping veterans navigate paperwork. And what a discovery at the permit office. Derek's dock extension had no application filed. A straight municipal code violation requiring immediate correction. Funny how balance works. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping in shallow water. "How dare you investigate? Just following your lead, ma'am." Due diligence. Equal enforcement. The crunch of gravel outside signaled reinforcements. Betty Jaime's ancient Buick. Betty, 73, had taught high school English for decades and could dismantle bad arguments like an art form. Karen didn't stand a chance. "Sorry I'm late, dear," Betty said, breezing in with a tray of homemade snickerdoodles that made Karen's store-bought cookies look like cardboard. I was admiring Marcus's boat. "Reminds me of the classics back when things were built to last." Then she leaned close, her voice just loud enough for everyone. "Theodore left boxes of papers in that basement, legal documents, surveys. Might be worth digging through sometime. I've played poker with colonels and contractors. I know a tell when I see one." Karen's flash of panic wasn't subtle, it was neon. Years later, I realized that moment taught me a truth about fighting bullies who abuse authority. They only have power if you don't know the rules. Document everything. Research deeper. Watch them collapse when their bluff is called. The meeting ended with Karen vowing to look into the matter, while I promised to review records. But both of us knew this was only round one, and she had no clue who she was up against. Walking home beneath gathering clouds, I caught the ozone tang of rain drifting off the mountains. Storm coming. And I knew Karen's slideshow was just the first flash before the thunder. She didn't take kindly to losing ground. Within a week, she escalated from neighborhood theatrics to open warfare. Her opening strike? Outside muscle. The city inspector arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, clipboard in hand, face weary like a man who'd seen too many petty complaints. His name was Rodriguez. "Got a report of dock safety violations," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. "Anonymous." "Tip?" "Anonymous, sure." Karen's BMW sat 3 houses down with her silhouette inside, phone pressed to her ear like a wannabe spy. Rodriguez spent 2 hours measuring, snapping photos, testing bolts. The cedar planks warmed under the sun, releasing that clean wood. Scent I loved. When he finished, he shook his head. "Everything's solid. Better than code, actually. Whoever built this knew their craft." He paused, glancing toward Karen's car. "Between us, Mr. Sterling, I see these calls all the time. Usually means someone's got a personal grudge they're dressing up as official business." After he left, I found an envelope taped to my front door. "Concerned residents request immediate action regarding unsafe watercraft." 7 signatures. Karen's sweeping script at the top, Derek's shaky scrawl beneath, plus 5 of her coffee club loyalists, but the wording mattered more than the names. She had described me as a transient resident with temporary military benefits who brought instability to their established community. The woman was practically putting her prejudice into legal text. That afternoon, my phone lit up. First Betty, then Phil Kozlov 2 doors down, then Mrs. Patterson from across the water. Each said Karen had dropped by, fishing for dirt on me. Betty's voice snapped with anger. "She's telling people you're some PTSD case. Says military types are unpredictable. Claims your boat. Is compensation for psychological problems." That evening, I sat on my porch with a beer and my laptop. If Karen wanted to play investigator, I could play too. And what I uncovered was gold. Derek Whitmore, the would-be councilman, had funneled HOA maintenance funds into his brother's landscaping company. $18,000 over 2 years, billed for emergency improvements that never happened. The invoices were public record, filed by Derek himself for tax purposes. Even better? Karen's real estate license carried 2 complaints, one for misrepresenting properties, another for pushy sales tactics. No suspensions, but the picture was clear. She bent rules when it suited her. Around 8, Phil knocked on my door, carrying 2 beers and a grim look. Phil's a contractor, built half the docks around this lake. The kind of man with 40 years of practical wisdom earned by fixing other people's big dreams. "Karen stopped by my shop today," Phil said, settling into Uncle Theodore's old rocking chair. "Wanted me to inspect your dock, maybe find a flaw." When I told her it was rock solid, she offered to pay me for a more detailed review. The evening air carried the rhythm of waves against the shore, blending with the faint hum of a fishing boat's motor. Ordinary lake sounds peaceful, steady, the very peace Karen tried to poison with her stage drama. "There's more," Phil continued. "She's been asking questions about your uncle. Wanted to know if he ever mentioned boundary lines, water rights, things like that. Got real interested when I said Theodore kept his legal business close to the chest. That night, I made a choice that would change everything. If Karen wanted to dig into my past, I'd dig into Theodore's." Betty's words about the basement echoed, and something told me Theodore's secretive files could reduce Karen's PowerPoints to kindergarten art projects. In the Army, I'd learned the strongest defense is knowing the battlefield better than anyone else. Time to explore the terrain Karen didn't even realize existed. The next morning carried the sharp scent of rain on pine needles and the first sign this fight was about to tilt in a way Karen couldn't imagine. Her third escalation arrived. in the form of law firm letterhead, the kind meant to make average folks cave faster than a deck of cards in a storm. The envelope was thick, expensive, hand-delivered by a courier who clearly wished he were anywhere else but our quiet lake. Notice of intent to pursue legal action, screamed the header in bold Times New Roman. Corinne's attorney, some city shark named Bradley Finch, had cranked out 3 pages of legal jargon demanding my boat's immediate removal, plus damages for supposed loss in property value and community disruption. Their demand? $5,000, plus a signed pledge never to dock anything bigger. Then a canoe without HOA blessing. I was halfway through reading that gem on my porch when my phone rang. Emma, my daughter, calling from her senior year at Colorado State. "Dad, what's going on up there?" Her voice carried the familiar mix of worry and irritation I knew too well from her teenage years. Derek Whitmore's wife friended me on Facebook, then messaged for 20 minutes about being concerned for your adjustment issues. That crossed a line. Targeting me was one thing. Dragging my daughter into Corinne's war? That was. Poking a bear who had military training and plenty of free time. "Emma, honey, how'd you like to help your old man with some research?" 3 hours later, she arrived, laptop under one arm, Thai food under the other, determination etched across her face. We turned the kitchen table into a command post, surrounded by takeout containers filling the cabin with the spice of basil. "And chilies." "Okay, Dad," she said. I've been digging through Corinne's socials, public files, even real estate reviews. There's a pattern. She slid a spreadsheet across the table that would have made my old logistics sergeant proud. She's done this before 3 other neighborhoods. Always zeroes in on single men or anyone she thinks doesn't belong. But the real jackpot was in Theodore's basement. It took until midnight to find it. Stacks of boxes, all neat and labeled in his exact handwriting. Tax records, old surveys, lawyer letters, water rights paperwork. The man had archived everything. The breakthrough came when Emma pulled out a manila folder labeled Lake Acquisition 1962 to 1978. Inside, deeds, contracts, receipts, an unbelievable story. "Dad, look at this," Emma whispered, her voice sharp with excitement. Uncle Theodore didn't just buy a lakefront lot. He bought the lake itself. The record spelled it out when the original developer went bankrupt in '63. Theodore quietly snapped up not just his cabin lot but every parcel with water rights attached. Over the years, deed by deed, he assembled ownership of the entire lakebed, water column, and all navigation privileges. The old-fashioned legal phrasing was crystal once you understood it. All waters, improvements thereon, and exclusive navigation rights in perpetuity. Theodore owned every drop Corinne kept shouting was community property. "This is insane," Emma breathed, cross-checking the deeds with modern maps. "Every other house goes to the high water line, but their deeds specifically exclude water rights. Theodore already owned them." My phone buzzed a text from Phil. Corinne's been asking contractors for dock estimates. Planning something big for spring. I showed Emma. She grinned with that mischievous spark that reminded me exactly why she was such a handful as a teen. "Dad, she has no idea what she's about to walk into, does she?" The next morning, I called Jennifer Patel, a property lawyer Betty had recommended. Sharp as a tack, experienced in HOA disputes. When I explained what Emma and I had found, silence stretched so long I thought the line had dropped. Finally, "Mr. Sterling, I need to see these papers immediately. If your description is accurate, this isn't an HOA case anymore. This is 30 years of trespassing on private property." That afternoon, as Jennifer reviewed Theodore's files, I sat on my dock listening to the water lap against the pilings. My water, my lake. 47 acres of mountain paradise Karen had been threatening to regulate for months. The irony was delicious, but my years in logistics had taught me something vital. Information only matters if you know how and when to use it, and Karen, oblivious, kept escalating, still bluffing, still digging, still carving her own downfall. I let her keep digging while I quietly prepared the perfect moment to show her just how deep her mistake really was. The next morning, Jennifer Patel called me at 7:30, her excitement crackling through the line like electricity before a thunderstorm. "Marcus, you need to sit down for this," she said, barely containing the energy lawyers get when they stumble onto a career-defining case. I spent all night with a property law specialist, cross-referencing every single document in Theodore's collection with current county records. I poured myself a fresh coffee and settled into Uncle Theodore's old kitchen chair, the one that creaked in exactly the same spot it had when I was 12, visiting for summer vacations. "Your uncle wasn't just eccentric," Jennifer continued. "He was a strategic genius. Between 1962 and 1978, he systematically acquired every water rights parcel linked to this lake, not just his own, all of them." Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting dancing shadows across Theodore's meticulously organized legal files spread across the table. 40 years of planning laid out in neat manila folders and carbon copy contracts. "Here's what happened," Jennifer explained. "When Pinewood Development went bankrupt in 1963, they had to liquidate fast. Most buyers went after the lakefront lots, but Theodore saw value in the parcels others ignored. He bought those water rights for pennies on the dollar. I could picture him doing it, my family's oddball, the stamp collector, the man building elaborate model trains in his garage, quietly assembling one of the most valuable private water holdings in Colorado. Every subsequent property sale around the lake explicitly excluded water rights. They'd already been sold to Theodore. Buyers got gorgeous homes, but the lake itself remained private property. The implications hit me like a freight train. Karen had spent months threatening to control my use of community waters, yet every drop of that water legally belonged to me. She had screamed on my dock about my boat in her lake, threatening lawsuits over property that was entirely mine. "Jennifer, what does this mean in practice?" I asked. She smiled. "It means every dock, every slip, every swimming and fishing spot exists only through your permission. The HOA has no authority here. They own none of the lake." Through the window, I saw Karen's white BMW pull into her driveway. She stepped out in her power suit, probably on her way to another realtor meeting, thinking she was protecting property values. If only she knew how spectacularly wrong she was. Jennifer continued, "Your uncle was quietly a conservationist, too. He filed preliminary paperwork for a conservation easement but never completed it, signaling he wanted to protect the lake while retaining legal control. It all clicked into place: the hermit lifestyle, the secretive finances, the careful stewardship of this natural treasure. Legally, I could have banned every boat, closed every dock, and restricted access entirely. But strategically, I could use this knowledge to shift the balance entirely." The coffee in my mug had gone cold, but I didn't care. 40 years of quiet planning were about to collide with 30 years of neighborhood assumptions. Karen's cease and desist letters suddenly looked like parking tickets written by someone who didn't own the lot. Jennifer's warning lingered in my mind. Knowledge is only power when you know how and when to use it. And Karen, of course, was still escalating, oblivious to the fact she had picked a fight with the person who legally owned everything she was trying to control. Over the next 48 hours, it felt like preparing a military operation, except this time the battle involved lawyers, environmental specialists, and a quietly motivated network of neighbors who had waited years for someone to call Karen out. Wednesday morning, Jennifer arrived with reinforcements. David Kim, an environmental lawyer specializing in water rights, and Colonel Sarah Rodriguez, my old JAG officer buddy who had retired to Denver and owed me a favor. Sarah whistled low. When she saw Theodore's files, "Sterling, your uncle just handed you the legal equivalent of a nuclear weapon. Question is, do you want to flatten the city or just take out one annoying dictator?" We spread everything across the dining room table. Surveys, deeds, environmental reports, and stacks documenting Karen's increasingly desperate behavior. The cabin smelled like strong coffee and focused intensity, the kind that comes when sharp minds tackle a complex problem. Jennifer began pointing at a color-coded map David had prepared. Marcus owns 100% of the lake bed, water column, navigation rights, everything. Every dock exists by your permission. Every boat launches with your tolerance. Every property owner has been trespassing for 30 years. David leaned in, his expertise adding another dimension. But here's the beautiful part. Theodore's research made it clear this lake was untouched, pristine, a perfect ecosystem with no pollution or invasive species. I could create a conservation easement that protected the environment while still allowing the community access. Sarah, ever the strategist, was already thinking several moves ahead. The real question wasn't what I could do legally, it was what I should do practically. Karen was escalating, thinking this was just another ordinary neighborhood dispute. Time to show her she was playing checkers while I had inherited a chess set. Emma had driven up from college, laptop in hand, that determined expression on her face whenever someone she cared about was being treated unfairly. She'd been tracking Karen's social media campaign, logging every exaggeration and lie. "Dad, look at this," she said, turning the screen toward us. Karen had been posting in regional HOA Facebook groups, painting me as some unstable veteran terrorizing a peaceful community. She even had 3 other HOA presidents lined up to testify about the supposed dangers of letting military personnel live in residential areas. The ugliness of it hit me like a slap to the face. This wasn't about boats or aesthetic standards, it was about Karen's prejudice against anyone who didn't fit her narrow definition of acceptable neighbors. She had weaponized her biases and rallied allies to her twisted crusade. "That actually helps us," Sarah noted, her tone calm and sharp as a prosecutor's. "Discrimination based on military status violates federal fair housing laws." She's not only wrong about property rights, she's creating civil rights violations. Phil knocked around noon, bringing deli sandwiches and grim updates from his contractor network. Derek had secured permits for a massive dock expansion with a boat lift capable of handling a 40-foot yacht. Apparently, the rules didn't apply to anyone named Whitmore. An hour later, Betty arrived with homemade apple pie and a quiet confidence honed from 40 years in the classroom. She had been subtly organizing neighborhood resistance, her intelligence network more impressive than anything I'd seen in government work. 5 families are ready to testify about Karen's harassment, she reported. The Johnsons, the Patricks, Mr. Henderson, the new couple in the Blue House, and even the Williamses people she thought were loyal supporters. We spent the afternoon constructing what Sarah called our strategic revelation timeline. Phase 1. Let Karen continue escalating while documenting everything. Phase 2. Reveal the true property ownership at maximum impact. Phase 3. Implement a fair lake use agreement that protected everyone except Karen from future abuse. Jennifer emphasized timing was everything. We needed Karen fully committed, hiring expensive lawyers, filing official complaints, maybe even initiating litigation. The deeper she dug, the more spectacular her fall would be. David had already begun drafting a conservation easement that would permanently protect the lake while guaranteeing community access. I would retain ownership while all current residents would have defined usage rights. Future buyers would know exactly what they were getting: lakefront property with legally clarified water access privileges. As the sun set over my lake, a literal thrill reminding me this was mine, I looked around our war council, a property lawyer, an environmental expert, a retired military prosecutor, my brilliant daughter, and a network of neighbors finally ready to stand up to a bully. We had better intelligence, stronger legal positioning, and the righteous fire that comes from seeing authority abused. Karen had no idea what was coming, but she was about to learn that sometimes the quiet neighbor you underestimate owns everything you're trying to control. Then she escalated. Not threats, but a real lawsuit, my boat's removal, $5,000 in damages, and a permanent injunction banning me from disrupting community harmony with oversized watercraft. Bradley Finch, her downtown shark of a lawyer, had crafted a masterpiece of legal fiction. According to his filings, my meticulously restored Chris-craft caused navigation hazards in public waters, noise pollution during quiet hours, and was a visual blight inconsistent with neighborhood character. He made a 30-foot beauty sound like a floating garbage scow. The real shock came on page 4. Karen was claiming adverse possession rights to the lake itself based on 30 years of alleged continuous community use. She wasn't just regulating my boat, she was trying to legally steal my lake, a claim Wild West claim jumpers would admire. Emma found the filing online within hours. Dad, she's gone full nuclear. This isn't harassment anymore, it's attempted theft of property worth probably $2 million. The morning after the lawsuit arrived, sabotage made its presence felt. Sugar in my boat's fuel tank. Enough to cause expensive damage if I had started it. The sweet, sickly smell mixed with diesel, nauseating, reminding me of tactics I'd seen in Bosnia. Phil's security cameras captured a shadow near the dock around 2 a.m., too dark for positive ID, but the posture and nervous shuffle were unmistakable. Derrick had a distinctive gait, even in grainy night vision footage. This is escalating beyond property disputes, Sarah said when I called her with the news. Vandalism changes the game. File a police report, document everything, and consider it a gift. They're creating criminal evidence while we prepare to dismantle their civil case. Detective Morrison from the county sheriff's office arrived, professional and weary from years of ugly neighbor disputes. He photographed the fuel tank, collected samples, and took my statement, every move measured. And thorough. Something about the sugar in fuel stunt caught Detective Morrison's attention. Funny thing about fuel sabotage, he said, tightening the cap, most people don't realize sugar dissolves in gasoline, creating a syrupy mess that gums up fuel lines and injectors. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. That afternoon, Karen escalated again, moving from vandalism to a full-blown character attack. She managed to convince Channel 9 News to run a story about supposed HOA intimidation against a military veteran, complete with dramatic footage of my boat shot from angles that made it resemble a destroyer threatening a peaceful pond. The reporter, some ambitious kid named Blake Morrison, had swallowed her story whole. Residents of this quiet lake community say they're living in fear of retaliation from a former soldier who refuses to follow basic community guidelines. He intoned, using the breathless cadence local news reserves for missing cats. Karen, perched on her pristine dock in a white sundress glowing against the dark water, delivered her lines with the wounded innocence of an Emmy-winning actress. We're just trying to maintain the peaceful character that attracted us all to this special place, she said. But she made a critical mistake. She repeatedly referred to our community lake and shared waters as if they were public. Every time she did, she was inadvertently creating evidence that she believed the lake wasn't mine, which would later look absurd once Jennifer revealed the actual ownership. Emma had been tracking social media reactions. Half the audience bought Karen's narrative, but the other half, who had endured similar HOA tyrants, were firmly in my corner. "Look at this one, Dad," she said, scrolling through Facebook comments. "I hope this vet tells that HOA which exactly where she can shove her boat rules. People have no idea what real problems look like." That post had 3,000 likes. Phil stopped by that evening with two critical pieces of intelligence. First, his contractor contacts discovered that Derek's dock expansion permits were based on falsified property boundaries. He'd claimed his lot extended 10 feet further into the lake than it actually did. Second, and even more significant, Karen had been shopping for expensive lakefront property in Durango, estates with private lake access and zero HOA restrictions. She was already plotting her exit while attempting to destroy mine. "She's panicking," Phil said, settling into Theodore's old porch rocker with a beer. "All this legal theater, the media campaign, the sabotage, it's the behavior of someone losing control who doesn't understand why." That night, I sat on my dock listening to water lap against the pilings, lights twinkling on houses around the shore. Karen would escalate again tomorrow. More lawsuits, more media, maybe. More sabotage. She was spiraling, and desperate people make catastrophic mistakes. From a strategic viewpoint, I almost felt sorry for her. She declared war without scouting the battlefield, unaware that the quiet neighbor she underestimated held all the cards. Her final desperate move came, wrapped in official HOA letterhead and the kind of language that screams Hail Mary from someone already behind. She called an emergency board meeting with a hired stenographer, her downtown lawyer, and enough theatrical flair to make Broadway jealous. The certified mail invitation demanded my attendance at a formal disciplinary hearing the following Tuesday. According to the notice, I face charges for willful violation of community covenants, harassment of board members, and my personal favorite, conduct unbecoming a community resident. Emma nearly choked on her coffee reading that last one. Conduct unbecoming? Seriously? Using military-style language against a veteran? Comedy gold. The meeting agenda held another gem. Karen had invited City Councilman Patrick Hayes, County Commissioner Linda Rodriguez, and ambitious reporter Blake Morrison to witness her public humiliation scheme. She was about to embarrass me in front of officials and media, oblivious to the massive legal landmine she was about to step on. Then came the bribery attempt. Sunday night, Cheryl, a nervous real estate agent and Karen's most loyal follower, knocked on my door at 8 p.m., clutching an envelope like it contained a rattlesnake. "Marcus," she stammered, "Karen wanted me to give you this. It's a settlement offer. Should drop everything if you just dock your boat elsewhere. There's even money." Inside was a $5,000 cashier's check and a pre-written agreement banning any watercraft over 20 feet on community waters, along with a non-disclosure clause preventing me from discussing the settlement. Cheryl, sweating despite the cool mountain air, added, "She said to tell you that fighting City Hall never ends well for anyone." Interesting. Karen threatened to use her husband's connections to make my life difficult through official channels, unaware that targeting a property owner with potential government retaliation opens a whole new class of legal consequences. Monday arrived with more chaos. Karen had somehow convinced the state environmental agency to investigate alleged lake contamination from boat fuel systems. Anonymous tip, of course. Wonder who reported suspicious odors and potential petroleum discharge near my dock. The inspector, Dr. Sarah Jamie, was competent and serious about her job. She spent 2 hours testing water, photographing my boat's fuel system, and documenting the pristine condition of everything. "Mr. Sterling," she said while packing up, "I've been doing this for 15 years, and this is one of the cleanest private docks I've ever inspected. Whoever filed this complaint is either grossly misinformed or deliberately malicious." Her report became official evidence. Another piece proving Karen's pattern of false accusations to harass someone she couldn't control legitimately. That evening, Phil arrived with troubling news from his contractor network. Derek had been quietly soliciting bids for major dock modifications that would encroach on my property. A boat lift capable of handling a 40-foot yacht, floating docks stretching 50 feet into the lake. Phil spread blueprints across my kitchen table. "They claim it's all Whitmore property, but look at these coordinates. Half of it sits on your land, and roughly 30 feet extends where Derek has zero legal rights." Betty showed up with Apple. Turnovers and intelligence gathered from decades of retired teachers' networks. Karen's calling every contractor in 3 counties, trying to find someone willing to testify your boat is unsafe, she said. When that failed, she offered cash for expert opinions on navigation hazards. The pattern was crystal clear. Karen had escalated from harassment to fraud, bribery, and environmental false reporting. Multiple state and federal laws were being broken while she attempted to steal property worth millions, all because someone had the audacity to say no. Tuesday. Morning dawned crisp. The mountain air sharpened every sound in sight. Across the water, I could hear Karen directing her setup for the accountability demonstration, arranging cameras and chairs like a prosecutor preparing for the death penalty. What she didn't know, Jennifer, Sarah, and David were already in position, armed with decades of legal documentation and the revelation of lake ownership that would turn her theater into a legendary public humiliation. The gentle lap of water against my dock mixed with the distant rumble of arriving cars. My dock, my lake, where Karen had trespassed repeatedly, threatening me over regulations she had no authority to enforce. Time to show her the depth of her miscalculation. Inside the community center, the tension was electric, the kind that precedes a spectacular implosion. Karen had converted the modest meeting room into her personal courtroom, complete with stenographer, professional lighting, and enough folding chairs for half the county. Behind the HOA board table, she positioned herself like a judge, flanked by her expensive lawyer Bradley Finch and Derek, nervously adjusting his tie. City Councilman Hayes and Commissioner Rodriguez occupied front row seats, wearing the polite, resigned expressions of officials fulfilling campaign duties they'd rather skip. The crowd was larger than anticipated. Phil's contractor network, Betty's teacher intelligence network, and Emma's social media alert system had filled the room. 43 people crammed into a space meant for 20. Karen's humiliation was about to be unforgettable. I entered precisely at 7 a.m., Jennifer, Sarah, and David flanking me like legal special forces. Jennifer carried a leather briefcase holding 40 years of Theodore's meticulously organized documents, while Sarah clutched a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. Karen's syrupy, overconfident smile lit the room. "Mr. Sterling, thank you for finally joining us for this long overdue accountability session," she cooed, dripping condescension. Blake Morrison positioned his camera for the perfect angle as Karen launched into her prepared statement, gesturing to enlarged photos of my boat that made it appear as threatening as the USS Missouri. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, every movement polished by realtor training, "we are here to address a situation that threatens the very character of our peaceful lakefront community. Mr. Sterling has repeatedly violated size restrictions, ignored aesthetic guidelines, and when confronted, responded with harassment and intimidation." Bradley Finch rose to present their legal case, complete with a courtroom-grade PowerPoint, property values, alleged navigation hazards, noise complaints, His argument hinged entirely on the false assumption that Corinne had legal authority over lake activities. The defendant's vessel, Finch intoned, full courtroom gravitas, represents a clear violation of established community standards governing shared water resources. Immediate removal, damages, and a permanent injunction are demanded. The audience shifted uneasily. It felt more like a witch trial than a neighborhood dispute. Many were visibly uncomfortable with Corinne's grandiose theater. And then it was my turn. I rose slowly, the way I'd learned to command attention in military briefings, nodding respectfully to the city officials and the camera crew. Thank you. Councilman Hayes, Commissioner Rodriguez, members of the community. I began, my voice calm, controlled. I appreciate everyone taking time from their evening for this important discussion. Jennifer opened her briefcase with the same theatrical precision Karen had used earlier, only this time the energy was ours. I accepted a thick folder from her and continued. Before we discuss boat regulations, there's something everyone should know about this lake. Karen's smile flickered, barely noticeable, but she pressed on with her script. Ms. Whitmore has spent considerable time discussing community standards for shared water resources, I said, holding up the folder. But there's a fundamental problem with her entire argument. The room went silent. Blake Morrison's camera whirred, capturing every heartbeat of the moment. This lake isn't a shared resource. I unfolded David's color-coded survey. Map, the one that showed property boundaries in unforgiving detail. I own it. Every drop, every square inch of water, the lake bed, and the navigation rights. The silence was absolute. Karen's confident pink faded to suspicious pale, then horrified white in seconds. Jennifer stepped forward, commanding the room like a professor revealing a master class. What you're looking at, she announced, holding up Theodore Sterling's original 1962 deed, is 40 years of legal documentation showing that Marcus Sterling inherited complete ownership of this 47-acre lake from his uncle, Theodore. Every dock, every boat slip, every swimming area exists on Mr. Sterling's private property by his tolerance and his permission. Karen croaked, her disbelief audible. That's impossible. This is community water. We've been using it for 30 years. By the grace and informal permission of Theodore Sterling, Sarah interjected, precise and cutting. Permission. That was never legally granted and can be revoked at any time. Bradley Finch's face went from smug confidence to pale shock. He just realized he'd been arguing a malpractice case suing a man for using his own lake. Blake Morrison's camera captured every moment of Karen's dawning horror. Every regulation she'd tried to enforce, every violation notice she'd written, every threat she'd made, it was all based on authority she never had, over property she didn't own. So, I said calmly, savoring the moment, when you demanded that I remove my boat from community waters, you were actually trespassing on my dock to threaten me about using my own lake. Commissioner Rodriguez leaned in, her political instinct sharp. Mr. Sterling, what does this mean for the community? It means, I said, locking eyes with Karen, that I could legally prohibit every boat, close every dock, and ban all water access by anyone other than myself today, this minute. The collective intake of breath sounded like wind rushing through the pines. I let it hang. But I won't, I continued. Because, unlike some people, I believe in being a good neighbor. Karen's humiliation was complete. High definition. Cameras captured every second, and half the county had witnessed the ultimate reversal. The woman who'd spent months calling me a troublemaker had been revealed as the trespasser, the bully, the instigator. Game, set, match. The community center emptied with murmurs of awe. Karen sat frozen at the board table, staring at the documents as if reading her own legal obituary. while Bradley Finch packed his briefcase like a man facing career-ending malpractice. Derek shuffled nervously, unable to finish his sentence. About neighbors and legal fees. Derek, I said, extending a hand, we're neighbors. This doesn't have to destroy anyone who's willing to be reasonable. Within 24 hours, Karen resigned via email. By the end of the week, I4. Sale sign was planted faster than Phil could say, good riddance. Betty won the emergency HOA election, running on a platform of treating people like humans, not violations, and her first act was apologizing to me on behalf of the community. But the real magic came next. The Theodore Sterling Memorial Conservation Fund launched that spring. Watching Emma present the first scholarships to environmental law students brought tears to my eyes. Uncle Theodore's quiet genius was finally recognized. Funding the next generation to protect places like our lake. Phil organized monthly cleanup days that evolved into community celebrations. Families picnicking on the shore, kids learning to fish from the docks, couples watching sunsets from the water. Exactly what Theodore had envisioned. 40 years of quiet stewardship finally blossoming into a living, thriving legacy. The annual Veterans Fishing Tournament became legendary, drawing participants from 5 states and raising thousands for veteran support programs. The scent of grilled burgers mingled with pine-scented air every August, while old soldiers shared stories and taught young ones how to cast properly. Jennifer's pro bono HOA clinic continued to help dozens of homeowners fight similar battles across Colorado. Her motto, borrowed from my Army days, became gospel for property owners. Know your rights before someone else pretends they own them. She kept Theodore's story as Exhibit A in every presentation about doing your legal homework. Blake Morrison won a regional journalism award for his follow-up series on community healing, and the lake became a case study in environmental law schools. Students visited every semester to understand how private ownership, guided by wisdom instead of greed, could protect public goods. 6 months later, I watched the sunset paint the lake gold when Emma called with news that made Uncle Theodore's legacy complete. Dad, she said, excitement in her voice, the state has designated our lake as a model conservation site, permanently protecting it from development while maintaining community access. And the best part? She added with a laugh. Karen tried to join the HOA board in her new community, but someone had read the news stories. They voted her down unanimously. The loons called across waters that would never again be threatened by petty tyrants. Their haunting calls mixed with the laughter of children swimming near Betty's dock. The evening air carried the scent of barbecue smoke and the contentment of a community that had learned to appreciate what they had instead of trying to control what they couldn't. Sometimes, justice isn't about punishment. It's about building something so beautiful that the people who tried to destroy it become irrelevant footnotes in a much better story. Every evening, I sit on my dock with a cup of coffee that tastes like victory, watching families enjoy water that has been protected for 60 years and will be cherished for 60 more. Uncle Theodore's quiet wisdom had created something Karen's petty authoritarianism never could. A real community based on respect instead of fear. That's what happens when bullies pick fights with people who know the actual rules, not the made-up ones. Share your HOA horror stories in the comments. We read every single one, and your nightmare might be featured in our next episode. Subscribe. 2 HOA stories for weekly tales of neighborhood tyrants getting exactly what they deserve. Hit the notification bell because next week we're covering the HOA that tried to steal a disabled veteran service dog. Trust me, you won't believe how spectacularly that backfired. You've been watching HOA stories, where entitled Karens get a reality check. If this episode gave you secondhand rage or satisfaction, hit that like button, leave your take. in the comments and subscribe so you're first in line for more weekly HOA chaos.